So we enter today into actually a new church year, and it begins with that season we called, as we mentioned to the kids, that we call Advent. A word about Advent. You may be interested to know that in the earliest days of our faith, the early Christians quickly structured a year that they would follow. The events of Jesus' life, the events of our Christian life, and that year would begin now, and it would begin with a time of preparation for the whole year. And it began with a 40-hour fast, time of no eating and thinking and so on, for 40 hours, in which the early Christians would do kind of a self-assessment. Now, as time developed, that fast became 40 days, and it became not a preparation for the whole year, but a preparation for the celebration of the birth of our Savior. So we mentioned that to the kids, this is Advent. And then we also referred to the fact that, of course, during the preparation time of Advent, we have this Advent wreath, a word about the Advent wreath. Actually, it's not that old a custom. It began in Germany, and it began with a Lutheran pastor who served very poor people and very poor children. Children who really didn't have the advantages of the wealthy, children who in many cases were not deeply educated. And so he began to think, how can I help the children prepare for the birth of Jesus? So he cut a round piece of wood, and on it he put 4 white candles, and in between each of them, 6 red candles. So each of the red candles stood for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and the white candle for Sunday. As time evolved, the candles in between went away, and the candles remained that are for the season of Advent, the 4 weeks of Advent. And they came in the color that we traditionally put on the altar in Advent, the color of purple, which is kind of is that blue or is that purple? They keep changing that. I don't see colors well. That's purple. The color that announces the coming of our King. That's the royal color, purple. And we'll get around to the pink one when we get around to the pink one. So how did it get to the United States? Actually, it didn't get here right away. So it was a custom in Germany, particularly among Lutheran congregations, the Advent wreath. But in the 1930s, the custom kind of came to this country. Again, generally early on among Lutheran Christians, and of course now it's spread to all the different kinds of Christianity here in our nation. And the 4 candles on it have come through the years to carry with each one a certain theme. Today we're going to be talking about the first one and the theme of hope. Then we'll be talking next week about the theme of peace, and then joy, and finally the theme of love as we prepare for the nativity, the birth of our Savior. Hope, today's theme. What a beautiful word in any language. It's got to be one of the most beautiful words that we can think of. It has been said about us that if we have hope, we can get through anything, we can endure anything if we have hope. Conversely, it's been said of us, if we are without hope, hopeless, we despair even sometimes at insignificant events in our life. When you stand up here on Sunday after Sunday, or whenever it is that you're standing up here preaching, you look out over a congregation. And truthfully, I ask myself, why are you here? No, I mean, each of you came into this building today, sometimes out of just routine, but sometimes because you really wanted to be here, because of the stuff. And there's a lot of stuff whenever you stand in front of a group of people. There's the stuff of loss, of those who have lost people they love and have to figure out life now. Of those who have lost their dreams, their dreams of what they could be and of what tomorrow could be, of those who've lost their jobs or had reductions in them. And there's broken relationships. The holidays tend to accent those. There's marriages that are struggling. There's relationships between parent and children, children and parent and grandparents that just aren't what they ought to be, and they cause us great pain. And there are those among us who are sick, not just with a passing cold, but with serious sickness, or those who are afraid of having some of those. I look at you and I wonder, I know me, I know what I deal with, but I wonder about you. And you come here and I'm supposed to talk to you about hope. What do I say that isn't trite? What do I say that isn't an insult to your intelligence or to your faith? What do you say about that? You know, I think we make a lot of mistakes when it comes to looking for hope, because we all do, don't we? Whatever it is that you're going through, you're looking for hope. Is there something that gives me hope in the middle of this thing that I'm going through? But we make a lot of mistakes, I think, when we look for hope. Sometimes we ask the question, why am I in this situation? What did I do? Is God mad at me? Did I do some awful thing that I'm being punished for? Even though week after week after week we hear about forgiveness, sometimes inside of us we wonder about that, don't we? Why me? And if we dwell on why me, we probably don't do a very good job of finding hope. I remember a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, one of the members of this congregation said to me, Pastor, would you go and visit my mom? She's dying of lung cancer. She doesn't have a pastor. She doesn't have a church. Could you go visit my mom? That's not usually one of our favorite kind of calls, because these people we don't know, and what do you say? Again, that isn't trite. So I thought, but of course it was somebody that you cared about, so I said, certainly I'll go see Mom. So I did. I went to see Mom. It was in a small, rather simple home south of here. Went into the house, and Mom was there in bed, as people are when they are approaching death. And she was propped up as people are. And I walked in, and she said, oh boy, they got the preacher here now. I guess I must be getting ready to die. And I kind of like that. I kind of like people who got a little bit of orneriness and a little bit of sparkle to them. And even near death, she had that. So I smiled, and she said, and you probably expect me to say, why me? And I certainly have heard that question many, many times, probably asked it a few times too. She said, but I'm not going to ask you that question because I know the answer. Now that I haven't heard. And I said, well, then what is the answer? Oh, she said, it's easy. The answer is, why not me? Why not me? Why not you? Why not me? Why not? What do any of us do to deserve escaping any kinds of challenges, difficulties, or burdens? That was a pretty important statement, she said. So long ago, I still remember it. I still remember it. But because if we're focusing on that question, why me, we're probably not finding hope. We're just trying to find blame. We do that, don't we? We blame people for what's happened to us. And so I can't hope for anything until whoever it is that I'm blaming for what's going on in my world fixes it. If my relationship with somebody ain't doing what it ought to do, I don't find much hope if I think that person who made it a mess needs to fix it, because I don't know what's going on in their world. If we blame God, we certainly don't find much hope, do we? But the biggest mistake we make of all, when we're trying to find hope in the middle of our burdens, the biggest mistake we make is that we say, well, I have hope that. In other words, we describe the only thing that will make me feel like I have hope. I'm sick, I have hope that I'll get better. So the only thing that'll make me have hope is when I start feeling better. That's a mistake. What we need to do is to have hope in. God. As long as I can't experience hope without answering the question, what does it look like? I won't have it. But when I focus myself on Jesus and on who He is, I can find hope. Well, to this point, I have ignored the text which was read to you a little bit ago from the 5th chapter of Romans. And I won't be long on it, but we do have to look at it because Paul lays out in it a rather clear and a little bit unusual step-by-step that ends up with hope. So he starts by saying in verse 3, we need to glory in our sufferings. Glory in our sufferings. Yeah, right. We need to glory in our sufferings. He says, yeah, really we do, because you see, suffering produces an endurance, a perseverance. In other words, be okay. Be okay with what you're going through. That's where hope starts, by not wrestling with it, but by saying, it's okay, I'm not exempt. Because that builds perseverance or endurance. If any of you are interested in sports at all, you know that people, to be successful at football, baseball, whatever the sport, do so only after they work hard to build up an endurance, whether it's of their lungs for running or their bodies for weightlifting or football or whatever it is, that kind of pain that comes in exercise is what builds up their perseverance. Then Paul continues. And he says, and that endurance, that perseverance, that continuing, that keeping on, produces, he says, character. That's not a very good translation of what the Greek says. The New Testament was written in Greek, and what the word really is, and this is really an unusual thought. Endurance, Paul says, produces not character. You know, character means personality or something. It produces, get this, a sense of God's approval. Approval. So that as I endure, I get a sense of God being for me, not against me. A sense that as we journey along through this, we being me and God, or you and God, I begin to get a sense that there is a God, and He's with me. We're getting ready for Christmas. So how does God heal the human wounds? He becomes us. Why does He become us? Because God can't suffer. He's not a body, He's not human, so He becomes human. And Jesus suffers so that He can be with those who suffer. So that endurance produces a sense of God's approval, and that, Paul says, produces hope. That God is for us. That what we have endured in the past is the sign of what we shall endure in the future. And that is that things will pass. That we will be strong enough to bear the crosses that we bear. That it will be, as the old hymn says, it is well with my soul, even before everything is well. So about hope. I read a story some time ago, and I think it was from Tom Brokaw's book about the Greatest Generation. I just remember the story. And in the story, it was a story written by a World War II vet who served on a destroyer, on a ship that found mines in the water, a minesweeper. And a minesweeper would go through an area as other ships were behind it where they thought the enemy had planted mines underwater that couldn't be seen. And of course, and if the ship hit one of those mines, it exploded, the ship could sink. And the minesweeper's job began with finding the mines. And this guy wrote what it was like to be on a minesweeper, sending out sonar, radar, sound, and listening very carefully to hear if it bounced off of a mine, so you could avoid the mine, and always wondering, did I miss something? which could eventuate in death, his or somebody's. And he said, out of that experience of listening that intensely for that sound, I learned to appreciate every day of my life. Every day. There's an old saying that says, may you truly live all the days of your life. May you focus not on yesterday because it's past, not on tomorrow because it's not here and it will be fine when it is, but on today, may you truly live it. If you're going through difficult days today, may you find in the middle of those difficulties hope and peace that comes from the knowledge of God's love for you. Cherish your life, not as we always wish it could be, but as it is. Because we are God's people, so it's Advent. So if you have one, go home and light your wreath today. And light that first candle. And hear the words of the scriptures that say, and God is with you. And in the midst of what you're going through, God is trying to show to you his approval and the hope he gives you. In him whom we call the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, our Savior, who came to be what we are, that we might strive in our journey to walk with him.